Next morning, it was time for a beer straight away. I didn't waste any time getting into that. Hamlet was busy, hauling stuff around. About that time, the pleasant feeling that had settled over me disappeared. But I guess that's to be expected. I hauled some steel. Then I got back to mining. I wanted to make a proper workroom. I was taking breaks for food, as you'd expect. While mining, the transport pod crashed. Someone named Blackout. In the end, though, I'm still a little upset with the world. Not here to look out for everybody. Back to my old angry ways, I guess. So I let Blackout lay. I finished up my mining. Got some walls ripped down. I was going to rebuild all that out of proper stone. See if I could mitigate any fires. I had some floor smoothing to do, and then I was off to bed after making decent progress. While sleeping, a wild woman wandered around nearby. Bonnie was her name. For the time being, I was going to let her go, do her thing. In the morning, I had some pemmican, and I just got right back to smoothing out the floors. I was going to rearrange a little kitchen cooking area, so I smoothed floors, moved my stove around, finished smoothing floors in that room, went on back to the rec room, which was probably more space than I needed. That's alright. I decided at that point to take a little walk around, observe my area before getting back to smoothing floors once again. There was a whole lot of work to do. Occasionally I take a break, have a little bit of pemmican, and keep on smoothing them floors. I was getting to be pretty good at making stuff. Pretty much smooth floors all day, and then it was off to bed. I was withholding myself from any beer, smoke leaf, trying to get some real work done. In the morning, pemmican was in order. I built some floors over some spots that couldn't be smooth because it was just dirt, and then I got right back to smoothing. So I smoothed floors for a while, and I decided to run out and see if I could grab some marble. Any other stone that was around. I was going to need all that. I was going to do some rebuilding. So I ripped down some walls that had been abandoned. Peeled up the floors as well. And that netted me a fair amount of material. While doing that, one of my power cables went again. Had a fire start in my freezer. Fortunately, nothing being made out of wood, this fire didn't get out of control at all. So I was in good shape. I finished peeling up them floors. About that time, the sky darkened. Ash started falling out of the sky. Seemed like some kind of volcanic winter was upon me. Some super volcano apparently erupted somewhere. That was caused me some kind of problems. I was a little worried for my plants, but there wasn't much I could do. I got back to smoothing floors, despite the fact that the power was out due to a solar flare. I spent time hauling in a bunch of them blocks. I didn't want to leave them out there too long. I was going to need them. And then I got to bed right about the time a dry thunderstorm struck. While sleeping, lightning caused a fire, and I didn't want my smoke leaf to go up. Not unless I was smoking it anyway. So I got that fire put out and decided to play a little chess despite the fact that it was only 1 in the morning. And I had a little pemmican. Did some floor smoothing again. And then I decided to harvest all the plants. I didn't want everything dying due to the volcanic winter. I didn't make it too far before I had to get to bed. I was tired as it gets. I realized at that point I had a bunch of ambrosia around. It was going to spoil if I didn't put it in the freezer. So after having some food, a little bit of beer in the morning, I got all the ambrosia moved. And I got right back to plucking plants, smoothing floors. I smoothed floors, all the while debating on doing some plant cutting. I'm not feeling fully dedicated to it. But eventually, I got around to it. Hamlet was helping out. Ever the good boy. Hauling in all the plants I'd cut. Getting them protected. And then we were off to bed once again. It was raining. When I woke up, I decided to do a bunch of cleaning. The place was getting to be a real pigsty. Then I decided to plant some plants, see if they'd come back for me. And there's a chance they would. So it wouldn't be all bad. Then it was back to smoothing these floors. And I was getting close. Over halfway done, I'd say. I was running outside, harvest a little bit of ambrosia. Well, while doing that, a whole bunch of fellas showed up, deciding they were going to attack me. Fortunately, they had decided to wait a while before actually doing it. I grabbed my rifle and got set up, see if I could give some of them the business before they started making a run at the base. But that many people, my traps certainly weren't going to hold up. Despite the fact that I was shooting at them, they were just wandering around, talking about how they were going to make their assault. And I could hear them laughing, snickering with each other. And I just kept on shooting. They didn't know where the bullets were coming from. I thought it might be a good idea at some point here, clean up all these stone blocks they were using as cover, inadvertently. I'd brought one of them down. The rest of them didn't seem too happy about that for the most part. I kept on shooting. There's still quite a few left. I decided I was going to have to get a little closer if I was going to get anything done here. Fortunately, I was a good shot. And I had a great weapon. I kept on shooting. Another one of them went down. He wasn't dead, but at least he wasn't going to come at me anymore. They let this go on way longer than I feel like they should have, but I wasn't going to complain, being that I was their intended victim here. So I kept shooting, and they kept walking around, oblivious to the fact, apparently, that they were getting taken out one by one. I killed another one. Gave him the business proper right. Kept on focusing on shooting the rest of them up. Trying to shoot the wounded ones first, see if I could bring them down. Hopefully I could end this assault before it even began. Given all the stuff in the way, the trees and the rocks, I was having a hard time hitting. But that's the way it goes. You gotta defend yourself best you can around here. People try and take every advantage of you they can. So I shot and I shot. I killed another, and the rest of them finally took notice of the fact that I was over here. It wasn't going to take too many more, though, before the rest of them went bugger off, I'm sure. My aim was a little bit off now, given my nerves were up. I ran away a bit. Didn't want to get caught by him. Especially one of these guys with some kind of weapon that would stab me up real good. Fortunately, once you shoot them, they ain't so quick anymore. So I ran back by my base, seeing if I could hide out in the doorway. Be a good idea to take a bunch of these trees down too, but that was a whole lot of work and I had my plate full at the minute. So I ran inside my home area. They started falling for the traps, and after 2 of them went down, the rest of them decided to heck with it. They were going to get out of here. I was fortunate. I only lost 3 traps in the exchange. And they didn't steal any of my block I'd left laying around outside. So I gave chase, see if I could take any more of these jerks down. They were scattering in all kinds of different directions, trying to get away from me. I kept shooting, killed another one, and that was as good as it got. The last three got away from me. On my way back inside, I picked up a bunch of blocks I'd left laying. Saved me a trip out here later. I got inside, I was hungry as can be, so I ate some food. Picked up some of the goodies those people that had died on my traps had left me. And I decided I'd better get the dead ones taken care of in the ground. Utmost priority was my potatoes, I suppose. Don't want my food to go bad, so I plucked some of them. Brought some steel out to rebuild the traps with. With the assaults coming in, I better keep those things up. Security was going to be tantamount. I played a little bit of horseshoes, and then I was off to bed for the night. I slept sound that night, a little bit hungry, but it had been a busy day. I'd done a lot of killing. I was fortunate not to have any nightmares. And when I woke up, had a little bit of pemmican, got to the business of harvesting all the potatoes, and then I decided a beer was in order before finishing planting the rest of the potatoes. I was all over the place. Eating, planting. Then I got to the job of making these traps back up. While doing that, a transport pod crashed. Not too far from me. Sly was her name. She didn't seem overly hostile, but I decided not to get involved once again. I rebuilt the final trap that was needed. I ran out, hauled some more of them blocks in. Hopefully I'd have enough here without having to make a bunch more. Save me some time there. After that, it was back to smoothing out some floors. Happy to be back to something normal after all that distraction. Things are looking pretty nice around the home area. I had some food. Hamlet had some food, and then we were both off to bed. I decided I was going to build some lights around first thing in the morning. I did that. I got a call about an incapacitated refugee, but I chose to ignore it. Decided to rip apart a steel building that was nearby, since my steel reserves weren't where I'd like them to be. I got a bunch of that handled. Then I carried in as much of it as I could. After that, some smoke leaf was ready for harvest, so I plucked all that up. Didn't want it to die in the volcanic winter, and I decided to chill out and have a beer. And when I was done with that, some cleaning was definitely going to be in order. The place was a real mess once again. The beer was delicious, and the cleaning didn't take long. Then I finished replanting all the smoke leaf, not knowing whether it would grow or not. I was back to ripping apart that steel building, hauling in what I could. I carried it in, then decided there was more work to do out there. So I headed out and finished the job. Ended up leaving some of it laying there, but I brought in as much as I could carry once again. I had some pemmican. Decided to run out and pick up the rest of that steel, despite the fact that one of my wind turbines had broken down. That would have to wait till morning. I was right tired at this point. I slept in the next morning. Didn't get up till 6 a.m. By then I was ravenously hungry. Had myself a feed. Well, I fixed that broken down wind turbine. My batteries were holding up just fine, so it wasn't a big deal. I'd had one of them big crazy raccoons step on one of my traps sometime in the night. So I rebuilt that trap, and then I decided I was going to take that raccoon down. He was suffering. I didn't want him to run around and die on his own, so I put him out of his misery. And then I decided I was going to have to bring him on in, butcher him up. Wasn't much sense letting him lay. So I set him in the freezer, Decided to smooth out some floors. Then I decided to finish the floors in the rest of the room with some nice fancy tile. I had all the block, there was no reason not to. Didn't want these dirt floors around, just tracking mess everywhere every time, so smooth floors after finishing the tile. Then I did some cleaning, back to smoothing, back to cleaning. Had a little bit of pemmican. This dog sure was tracking a lot of mess around here, but he's worth it. That's the best darn dog I ever had. After that, back to bed once again. I was extremely impressed by the way my little rec room was coming out. And in the morning I did a little cleaning. Got to smoothing floors before having a little breakfast and getting back to smoothing floors. I was feeling pretty good. Decided to rearrange the kitchen a bit. So I had some pemmican, moved things around once again in the kitchen. Try and get some space to put supplies when I get to cooking again. I set out my brewing table. Since I had a bunch of hops, a little more beer would never hurt. I could hear animals screeching off in the distance, seemingly on my traps, but nobody was, so I wasn't going to complain. I did have a good supply of steel laid up, so that was alright. And then I decided I was going to do some cooking after that. My pemmican supplies were pretty low, so I set up some supplies and got right to the business of cooking. There was tons of meat around, tons of veggies and figs. About that time, a group of huskies decided to show up and join me. I wasn't going to complain too much. I named them Boris, Lisa, and Attacker. One of them seemed vicious, and that seemed like a fitting moniker. I had plenty of food, so I wasn't upset by their presence. After cooking for a spell, played a little bit of chess. A little buzzing started in my ear at that point, which does not make me content, but I think I can work through it. Did a little more cooking, and I was off to bed. Me and Hamlet, sleeping side by side. I got a call from someone being chased by 10 people, and I decided that was too many for me to deal with, and once again I had enough on my hands. I feel like I've acquired quite a bit of wealth around here, and that might attract some real attention, which is unfortunate. I had a woman pass by at that point, went by the name Gorilla. I left her to her own devices, decided I had to do some cooking here. I had a wild warg nearby, and going around attacking pigs. That wasn't my business. About that time, a whole bunch of oranges fell out of the sky. I haven't had an orange in as long as I can remember, so I was pretty enthused by that. I went and picked them up before that warg, and the pigs got a hold of it, and got back to the business of cooking, and that buzzing in my ear stopped about that time. So that was good. I decided I had enough pemmican stored up, so I stopped cooking for a bit. I had too much stuff for my cooler to handle. I did decide it was time to make some wort so I can get some beer going. I had tons of hops around, so I got to the business of getting all that cooked up. I debated on building another fermenting barrel. In the end I decided it probably wasn't worth it though. So before going off to bed I put some of that wort in the fermenting barrel. I went to bed happy that night, thinking about all that beer. Woke up about 4 a.m. and some cleaning was definitely in order at that point. After that, a little bit of pemmican, and I was back to making wort. Put it in the fermenting barrel straight away when I had enough to fill it. About that time, a lynx started hunting one of my dogs. So I decided to let them huskies all in the base. See if I could keep them from getting killed. And sure enough, I ran out there to save the day. But that lynx got itself killed on one of my traps. which is a little frustrating, but what are you gonna do? All them dogs were starving as it was, so it was a good thing I'd let them in. I made that mistake once before, so I was happy to have them around. I didn't really want to keep them too long, but I didn't want to see them die either. So I made as much wort as I could, got the rest of the hops put away properly, fermenting barrels full. Decided I was going to make a bunch of kibble and keep these dogs with food. And that became my next focus. Shouldn't take too much, and hopefully someone will come along that would treat them well. I had plenty of supplies, so I wasn't too upset about how much it took to make it. For the minute, everything would be alright. I made about 200. Should keep them little boys eating just fine. Then I got to rebuilding the trap that Lynx had set off. After that, there were walls to be smoothed. So I worked on that for a little bit. I had some crazy creatures come by. Big fancy horn on their head, but looked pretty tough and looked pretty violent. So I just let it be. Didn't need the meat, didn't need the trouble, and didn't want to rebuild a bunch of traps. I decided to restrict all these huskies to outside my home. I ripped down the last of the wooden walls. I got to rebuilding all that. Some of the blocks I'd found outside. It was high time I got a workroom built. Something proper. And I was going to need heat, walls, all that kind of stuff. And I made a little bit of progress. I was so tired I was about to fall over. But I forced myself. Finish at least closing off my main room before going off to bed. And Aurora started. I didn't really get to enjoy it though. Woke up about 6 a.m., had some food, got back to making walls. This is all coming together real nice, and I was right happy with where it ended up. The dogs seemed happy and well fed. I wasn't going to waste too much time training them, at least not at the minute. Built some lights. I had to build some air conditioning too. I wanted it to be nice and pleasant in there. I ran right out of blocks. But fortunately, there was a ton of stone chunks laying around. And so I took some time, made a few extra blocks, finished off my walls, started working on the floors in the work area. Took a break, have a little bit of food, do some cleaning before getting back to the business of making them floors. And it didn't take long once again. Started moving my equipment in there. Places to do my work. Occasionally stopping to make extra blocks. And I decided to finish the floor and the walls right before going to bed. Even did a little cleaning. Things were looking up around here, and I was pretty happy with that, despite the volcanic winter that was on. I got a message about some bandit camp that needed to be taken out, and it really wasn't too far. They were offering some pretty ripe goods for it, so I backburnered that in the corner of my mind. Upon waking, it was time for some more pemmican, and then it was time for a beer, despite it being only 5 a.m. Finally got my research bench set back up now that I had a proper spot for it, along with my chair for sitting in while doing researching. I decided it was time to do some cleaning since my new workroom was such a mess. I was also going to make some dog beds. I had plenty of materials. It'd be nice to give these dogs a little bit of place, call their own, rest comfortably. There was so much light leather around. I made them out of that. And they seemed happier than before. As I was working smoothing some walls, I decided to focus on my main rec room area before finishing the workroom. There was going to be a ton of floors needing smoothing in there, and my kitchen still needed some proper floors as well. But one thing at a time. I banned them huskies from my workroom since they're just tracking filth all around. I made some extra stone blocks. Decided to focus on smoothing the wall. Which is what I did. Occasionally stopping to clean. I'm amazed at the mess that shows up around here. I did finish my rec room. Made some blocks. Did a ton of cleaning. And right as I went to bed, I had a transport pod crash nearby again. A fella named Venomin. And I decided I wasn't going to deal with him. At some point, I'd get back to that. That wild woman was still wandering around out there, and a boom rat decided to show up and get friendly with me as well. I told it not to come inside. I didn't want it in my home area blowing something up, since I've lost a handful of traps to him already. And he seemed to be listening for the minute. So I did a bunch of cleaning. There was blood and filth all around. I worked on that. And then I had a little bit of pemmican. Decided to go back inside. It was time to toss some horseshoes. It had been a while, and I do enjoy it. At that point, a warg started hunting one of my dogs. So I restricted that dog to inside, didn't want him out there. And of course that warg came on in. I was asleep at the time, and that was a bit of a problem, because that warg got right through all my traps without an issue. So I started shooting at it. I accidentally shot Boris twice. Did not mean to give him the business, but he got it. I was giving that warg everything I had and doing some decent damage. In the end, I had to flee from it. He got right inside a nice rec area. Crazy wild animal. I managed to bring him down. I did shoot up my heater a little bit. And I had to clean up that body. I decided I might as well eat him since he caused me such a problem. Boris was in need of some treatment since I had shot him. I decided I would use some meds on the poor boy since it was my fault he was injured. I tended him alright. Had to run back and grab more meds, treat the second wound. He seemed alright, and he got well treated. I did feel bad though, poor guy. But had the war got a hold of him, he'd be dead right now. I had some food, a little bit of beer. And lo and behold, despite the volcanic winter, my hops are growing pretty well. Did a bit of harvesting, then decided I should focus on getting rid of all these wooden walls, lest another fire start. So I got a part of them ripped down, replaned it all, started working on that. I had to get it closed up sooner rather than later, since that left my freezer exposed. So I hauled the supplies in to remake them. Decided I was going to stay focused on this task until it was finished. And it was more than a little bit of work, but I got it done. Occasionally taking some time to feed Boris, since the poor boy couldn't get up and walk on his own due to gunshot wounds. I finished my work area, smoothing some walls, and then I was back to bed. When I woke up, it was early afternoon. It was high time I did a bunch of cleaning around here, although the mess just keeps on showing up. Had a little food, was right back to pulling hops out of the ground, and then replanting them all. Before taking a break, play a little bit of chess and chill out, thinking about how I was going to need to clean when I got done with that. So I cleaned, finished planting hops, And then it was time to make some wort. My beer was coming up, about ready to be pulled out of the barrel. So I made wort, decided to be in my best interest, get my supplies nearby and at hand. Got all that pulled in. Made about as much wort as I could. And since I didn't have any extra fermenting barrels, decided to let that sit in the freezer for now. Hope it didn't kill off all the yeast. Caused me to get a bad batch of beer. But what could you do? After that, I needed to make a bunch of blocks. I was going to expand this house a little bit more. Needed some more flooring. I'd like to make a spot for people to be. And before that, it was time to go to bed. I'd made excellent progress. Things were really coming along. Eventually, I'd get right back to research. But for now, I was going to call it a day.